This episode is a very cool full circle moment for me, as I'm joined by Kelvin Newman. Long-term listeners of this podcast will know that name because Kelvin used to host this podcast. And my first ever appearance on a podcast was with Kelvin when he was the host. These days, Kelvin runs Rough Agenda, a specialist marketing events company based here in the UK. Rough Agenda are well known for hosting the world's biggest search marketing conference, Brighton SEO. And the world's biggest search marketing conference is about to get even bigger. Kelvin and his team are headed to San Diego on the 9th and 10th of November 2023 for the very first Brighton SEO US event. If you don't have tickets, you'd love to make it to the very first Brighton SEO US event, and you can be in San Diego for the 9th or 10th of November 2023, listen up. For listeners of this podcast, Kelvin is giving away 5 tickets for each day of Brighton SEO US. To be in with a chance of winning, email Kelvin at brightonSEO.com with the subject line podcast competition and note the day that you want to attend in the email. The competition will close on the 26th of October 2023, with winners being selected at random and contacted shortly afterwards. In the episode, Kelvin shares a little about the Brighton SEO journey so far, the decision making that has gone into launching the first Brighton SEO US event. He shares his insights on the differences between launching an event in the US and the UK, and we get a little bit of a preview about what to expect from Brighton SEO US. Enjoy the episode.
This is Internet Marketing.
So listeners of this podcast might be familiar with this voice. This is Kelvin Newman. And Kelvin, just earlier today, I was trying to find out when you were first involved in this podcast. Do you happen to know that off the top of your head?
A while ago, yeah. Yeah. Certainly in the kind of, the podcast when it just was iTunes. Yeah, I think it was before you could get podcasts on Spotify and stuff like that. So that probably dates it in terms of a period of time. But yeah, certainly I want to say pre-2016 probably sounds about right.
The first episodes of this podcast were published under your name. So I assume you had some involvement with it, even if you weren't hosting.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, so it's a slightly strange one. So I think that probably was a foible of the, RSS and republishing stuff.
Right.
So yeah, there's Daniel Rolls, who many people might know from podcasting. He really was the him and Andy started it off, and then over a period of time I started to guest. Then Daniel moved on and did his various bits, and I hosted it for a period of time with Andy, and then Andy did it on his own, and then of course you took over. So yeah, it's all that kind of the small world of this podcast, I suppose.
Taking it full circle for you and for me, because you might not know this, but my first ever podcast appearance was with you when you were hosting. I can't remember the year. I think it was probably around 2015. I actually can't remember. I think we released a podcast about guest posting back then, which was
it sounds about right. Yeah,
2015
of its period. Yeah, I was going to say I wouldn't recommend anyone goes back and listens too closely to the previous ones. They'll either be very dated in terms of the stuff we were referencing, and just generally being a bit cringe as well, I'm sure.
These days, you're the founder of Rough Agenda. Do you want to describe in your own words a little bit about what Rough Agenda is, who you are?
Yeah, so Rough Agenda is an events business. We do a number of events, but fundamentally Rough Agenda is the business that organises Brighton SEO. So Brighton SEO, we've been going about 13 years now. You can tell an SEO named it because it's started out as an SEO event in Brighton. So we gave the name precisely what it was, which always works well. And it started out as half a dozen people meeting in an upstairs room of a pub in a pub called the Quadrant near the Clock Tower in Brighton. That very first event, there was room for probably about 15, 20 people, and 30 people showed up. So next time round, we moved to another space that would hold 100, and then 120 people showed up. And just kind of went through this process of, growing the event. So now it's twice a year in Brighton. About 3,000 people attend each time, so every 6 months, and they're coming from all over the world. So I think last time round we had more than 50 different people who travel from more than 50 different countries to make it to the event. And it's just kind of become this started out and still has some of that similar kind of community gathering, lighthearted kind of feel that you get from starting in a pub, but obviously with the scale, scope and reach of being the biggest search marketing event in the world.
And it feels to me that it's become a week-long celebration of marketing. So at one point, Brighton SEO, I can't remember, Brighton SEO used to be once a year, and now it's twice a year. The conference itself is across 2 days, and then you have your fringe events that you host during the week as well.
Yeah, it's kind of one of these things that, for people who are making that trip, the multiple days is a big thing for it. So it used to be like a single day of training and a single day of conference. And then after COVID, we added an extra conference because we wanted to, in the kind of environment of, quite how busy and hectic it was pre-COVID. So that allowed us and gave us the nudge to go to 2 days. And we're playing about a bit with the format now in terms of for the UK event, but certainly there's a kind of, we want the people who are making that trip to feel that it's a worthwhile one to do so. And, historically the main day was a Friday. So it's often people come down and stay for the weekend and enjoy the Saturday in Brighton as well. So they get a bit of like a, work trip and a personal trip out of it.
Which fringe events do you host now?
So there's a number of different things. So they cover like connected areas. So there's the biggest two are Measure Fest. So that's web analytics and conversion rate optimization. Although probably a little bit more analytics than CRO. It does touch on that, but it's kind of more of that like measurement and reporting sort of side of things. And then one that's called the Search and Social Advertising Show. So that's covering paid search, pay-per-click, paid social, a little bit of kind of programmatic, but most in that kind of like the areas that are kind of pay-per-click rather than CPM or any of that type of stuff. And we also do the online PR show and e-commerce marketing show as well. But kind of playing around a bit in terms of like, it's a really interesting sort of concept really, because there's, increasingly like it's quite nice when you're programming an event to like treat things as little silos where it's kind of self-contained and it's, just one individual topic. But the reality is that most people who are working in digital are kind of either they've got roles where they're touching on lots of different sort of disciplines or sort of areas of expertise, or indeed, even if they're a specialist, they're interested in those areas. And it's kind of often quite, when people are attending events, I often recommend people go to the talks and sessions that are sort of not their core job. So it's sort of the connecting areas, the things that they're kind of interested in, because often that'll be the areas where they learn the newest stuff or are able to take the most away. If you're like a specialist technical SEO who lives and breathes that and does it all day, every day, it's probably quite tricky for you to learn a lot more in technical SEO, but you might take quite a lot more from go to a content strategy session or a web analytics session. So it's, like we're trying to find that right balance between having a proposition that makes sense for people when they've got to buy a ticket or sponsor the event, but also kind of ensuring that people get the most variety and diversity of like knowledge from attending the event.
And one of the reasons I mentioned the fringe events leads on to Brighton SEO US. And that's because I imagine at one point, and you get to be a little bit embarrassed here, but Brighton SEO is hugely successful no matter the measure. The number of people, the topics, the speakers, as we just said there, it's now a biannual, nearly a week-long celebration of marketing. And having been in Brighton, I've lived in Brighton for 15 years, you cannot get any bigger. So at some point you must have been thinking, well, what do I do here? How do I scale? And I assume there would have been some consideration to the fringe events and then some consideration to location. So, how did the US come on the radar?
Yeah, well, it's kind of serendipity to a certain extent, really. So, certainly, there's an angle of how we can grow things in Brighton, and that's certainly still part of the plan. And that will be in terms of, duration, but also going multi-venue. So, we're quite inspired by things like, South by Southwest or Cannes Lions or, even, Hay Festival and stuff like that. So, there's certainly scope for us to go multi-venue. And to be honest, you get the political conferences, so the political parties in the UK host in Brighton occasionally as well, and they'll take the Brighton Centre where we are and the Hilton and the Metropole and all these kind of different close by buildings. So that's still kind of there and it's definitely kind of in the longer term thinking. But the US sort of came about by a number of different connecting things. So for a long time, we've had people traveling over from the States. And, they say, lots of our sponsors are from there, lots of attendees are from there, lots of speakers travel over from there. In fact, I think actually that by country, for the UK event, we get more people pitching to speak from the US than we do the UK. So that kind of gives you a sense of kind of the appeal for speakers. And for a long time, they're saying, well, we love making the trip, but it's mad that you're not doing something in the States. So for a long time, we'd had that kind of, you should be doing this from our speakers and, also from our sponsors. But it always felt like a big leap. But yeah, and then like when COVID happened, obviously that's changed the ecosystem and the calendar of events. So there's a number of event series that used to run in the States now don't. So HeroConf, which was a PPC event, doesn't run anymore. Search Love, which was a SEO event, doesn't run anymore. SMX, which was the big series, predominantly is online now. I think they do some European stuff in person. I think there might be plans in the States to come back in person as well at some point in time, but at the moment they're all online only, and that works quite well for them for a variety of reasons, I think. So yeah, kind of like this opportunity was like, okay, a lot of the events that used to run there aren't running anymore, so that creates an opportunity. And yeah, they're a great hire as well. So we were able to hire Lindsay Jones, who used to run HeroConf, and ran Search Love from day zero. So she, we were able to employ her. So it was kind of, again, this like opportunity, the right people, it felt like the right time. And yeah, wanted to give it a go really. So it was then a case of finding a city that felt like Brighton. And yeah, San Diego became the one that we decided for the launch.
I didn't know that about some of the conferences in the US that were maybe struggling or have now gone or disappeared. Yeah, I've had some guests on this podcast that have said to me, we've seen Brighton SEOs coming to the US. Isn't that a really competitive market? And I was like, I don't know. Is it? I don't really know.
There's lots of great events. There's lots of good regional ones there. But yeah, we felt there was a bit of an opportunity. And in fairness, mostly the events in the States historically have been like conferences. So that, like I said, it's kind of a weird events thing to get into. But like, usually it's like three main types of business event there's several, but there's three that like are worth sort of discussing here. So you get a conference. So a conference will be often hundreds of attendees, and it makes its money from delegate sales. So by selling tickets. And often there'll be one track, maybe two tracks. They're sort of smaller scale, and they make their money from people paying for a ticket to be there. And that's predominantly what there's been in the States. And in the past, some of them got quite big, but that was kind of their model. They had a little bit of like trade show and exhibition on there on top. Then you also get your trade shows. So in the UK, there's quite a few of these, like B2B marketing, e-commerce expo, and all of these kind of things where they don't make money from tickets, they make it from sponsors and exhibitors. So they're like often have 10,000 attendees, but people tend to nip in and out and they're only there for a short period of time. They're not paying to be there. They aren't quite so common in the States in SEO, but could work. But we're like in the middle. So we're like a convex, as they call it. So we're making money for some of the, we give away lots of free tickets, but lots of people are paying to be there because they're getting like additional days or training or kind of access once the free tickets have been allocated. And we're also making money from sponsors. So yeah, so in the States, there's never really been that kind of, a convex one. And increasingly the events that have run in the last sort of like 10 years or so have been frequently kind of like, 500 attendees, single track, and $1,000 to attend. So we've kind of come in and done it in a slightly different way with cheaper tickets and, ultimately an aspiration to have, a much larger scale event than those smaller conferences.
And I don't know anything about San Diego. So what was it about San Diego that attracted you?
Well, yeah, it's a city on the coast, which again, it's like on the water. You can see the Bay Area from our hotel, some amazing views out there. It's kind of a sunny, relaxed, kind of creative city. And yeah, it felt like it was quite good there. And it's an interesting city as well because it's very well set up for events. Okay. So obviously, like our first event's in a hotel, the Grand Hyatt. So confusingly, it's this is mostly confusing for people in the UK. Outside the US, it's outside the UK, it isn't, but it's Brighton SEO. So obviously that's the name of a city. And we're hosting at the Manchester Grand Hyatt. So Manchester is a city in the UK, but it's in San Diego. So it's kind of got like 3 different locations in the name of where we're hosting it. But yeah, that's like right on the water there. And it's right near the convention center where Comic Con is held. So there's like 5 or 6 really great hotels, really great event spaces, really great places to go for lunch, bars and all that kind of thing. And it's quite near this Gaslamp Quarter, which is sort of like, I suppose, the Soho or the North Lane Brighton, or kind of the northern quarter in Manchester, and so it's right, really well set up for that. So it felt like a good place, and there's quite a substantial tech community there as well, as there is in many places in California. So it felt quite good for that reason.
Have you spent time over there then?
Yeah, so obviously Lindsay, who's kind of leading on the event, she's hosted events in San Diego before, so she knows it very, very well. And I've been out and spent a week or so there in the run up to preparing for the event, and it's definitely a kind of place where I can see why people move and stay there. It's lovely.
So this journey so far, one thing that you didn't talk about as you were going through that is any kind of validation. So the hire makes sense. The kind of looking for a different location makes sense. Did you validate the idea in any way, or did you just have that naturally by, you said there, demand for people that were coming to the UK, and you just took that as, okay, people are interested in coming to the UK, we're pretty confident we can make it out there? Or did you look at any other kind of metrics or data?
Yeah, I mean, so like obviously we're asking the question, you kind of like in any kind of like business decision, you can do your qualitative and quantitative research, and we definitely like erred more on the qualitative rather than quantitative kind of process. But we were looking at during COVID and after COVID, where our online event attendees were coming from. So that kind of again validated the scope that's there, and of course it's a huge market as well. So it kind of with any of these kind of things, it's a leap of faith to some extent, but we've been really kind of flattered by the support that we've had already for the event, and that the sponsors who have signed up to support the event, the speakers who have put themselves forward to speak at the event, and everyone who's bought a ticket so far. So it's a learning curve and it's a new thing, but for us it's all it's touch wood, it's it's a month to the event now, you never know quite how it'll go, but the run into that has been pretty pretty rewarding, and kind of validated the excitement and confidence we had in the idea.
The learning curve part, I'm interested in that, and kind of what have been the differences between organising this event for the US in comparison to the UK. What comes top of mind as I say that? What's been the most difficult part?
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitably, it's like the business model of how event spaces is quite different in the venues that we've dealt with are quite different. So like in the UK, we host the event in a big sort of, well, it's not big, it's like a small arena, I suppose is the best way of putting the Brighton Centre. And the deal with the Brighton Centre is they tell you the dates that are available, and they tell you how much it's going to cost to hire the space, and if it's available, you hire it, and that's the flat fee. Whereas in the States, it's far more, there's a bit more kind of complexity of what's going on in terms of, well, if you sell this amount of room nights in the hotel and all that kind of thing. So that's been a bit of a like adjustment in terms of business model behind the scenes. But it's not mega unusual, and some events in the UK do kind of operate on those sort of frameworks. But it's also just like there's really interesting stuff around like the scale of the US as a country, really. So Brighton, we're really fortunate that there's quite a lot of the UK's main population centres. You can get to Brighton in a small amount of time. So it's quite easy to do a single day trip to Brighton, or a single overnight, whereas like it's a little bit more involved if you're coming from New York to San Diego, and plenty of people are making that trip. But there's been a bit of kind of some of the patterns and ratios of how different types of tickets have sold have been different from how it does in the UK. But that's inevitable, right? Isn't it? It's a slightly different marketplace, and people are going to have different demands and expectations. And it's in any kind of international expansion for any business, you can't expect it to be exactly how it was in your original market. It's that kind of there's variances there, but then equally, hopefully the core of your product, in our case the event, is kind of got some appeal to that international audience.
The logistics part is interesting to me. Is that something that Lindsay takes care of, or because I imagine that would be one of the most difficult parts of organising things out there? You've got all these different speakers and attendees coming from lots of different locations in the US, and I imagine from other countries as well. So who's managing that part?
Yeah, so it's like, Lindsay's obviously got the experience there as well, and a lot of the team who've like been working with us on the UK event are involved. So like Dre and Joe and Tom, who are kind of like a big part of the UK team, are heavily involved in this as well. And obviously we've relied more on the UK team to be leading on the UK stuff while we've been kind of concentrating on that. So it's a huge collaborative effort, and in bringing any kind of event together. And like we're really fortunate that I've got a great team, obviously, but also we're quite used to being, distributed, remote, flexible, and like independent. So, that's always been how we've operated, and that has stood us in good stead for kind of trying new things out, because it's like I've got a very well qualified, intelligent team, and I can kind of rely on them to, take responsibility and make things happen.
And I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, so feel free to tell me if you don't want to answer. But I assume this is very much you're testing the water for the US market, and if everything goes well, your plan would be to go back.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so it's very much kind of the expectation is that it's not all signed and sealed, but we should be back in San Diego at a very similar point in time, next year. And longer term, the kind of plan is and hope is that we can do the event in the West Coast in San Diego. Well, our plan is to stay in San Diego there. It might change, but at the moment, that's very much the plan. And then get somewhere that's potentially a little bit more suitable for the East Coast, whether that'll be like directly on the East Coast or somewhere that's just like Chicago, which like technically isn't the East Coast, but is a bit more suitable for people on the East Coast to get to than California is.
Yeah. And just, I'm interested in the topics and a little bit about the sponsorships as well. So maybe just starting with topics. Are the topics going to be similar to what is discussed in the UK? Have you noticed any difference between, I guess, what people are interested in the US market versus the UK at the moment?
There's a few differences in as much as, like, for example, I think like local SEO is significantly, or local search is, a much more serious undertaking in the States than it is in the UK and Europe, I think. Yeah. But yeah, mostly, of our speaking lineup, I reckon probably 60% have spoken at a Brighton SEO before. So like they're, in the UK, so they're kind of familiar with us from that side of things. And yeah, I don't think there's too many where it would be that I couldn't program it in the UK, if that makes sense. I don't think there's many there where I'd kind of go, oh, we couldn't do it for that reason. There are some differences. So, like, albeit we do like I say, we do the paid search fringe in the UK, we've got far more straightforward paid search in the program to launch this than we would do in a Brighton SEO without the fringe. So that's kind of part of it there as well. And yeah, that we've got new speakers who wouldn't have been able to make the trip. So, but certainly I don't think it's not like it's a different area. So, if you were an attendee who would, come to the UK event and take some value from that, I would imagine you'd hopefully have a very similar kind of experience from the US event as well.
And a quick plug for the headline sponsors, and I'm curious, this is both a question and a quick plug, so feel free to give them a quick plug. But is there any difference between what you've experienced in demand for sponsorship in the US versus the UK? Like the types of companies? Yeah,
we're very fortunate that like a lot of the people who are kind of sponsoring the event are people who we've had some kind of relationship with before. So not all of them, but yeah, certainly kind of, like Wix Studio, who are one of our headline sponsors. We're very fortunate to work with them in the UK and in the US. So they were a huge supporter of ours. And, when we announced what we were doing, they were kind of, we've been really lucky that a lot of our sponsors have kind of come to us for it. So, we're hugely appreciative of that. But also this is kind of, like Journey Further, kind of another headline sponsor of ours. And interestingly, there's quite a few like agencies who've got involved in the event in the States who kind of have come from the UK and are, at various stages of launching in the States, whether that's they've been there 5 years and they've got a team of 25 people out there, or if they're a smaller agency that starting out again in the States. And yes, that's been an interesting sort of like cohort of sponsors that we've got there as well as kind of local SEO agencies and the technology companies who, are very keen to bring together people who work in search.
And you personally, are there any talks or any speakers that you're particularly excited to hear from?
Well, so we've got two sort of keynote sessions, and they're both quite exciting. So one is that it's a slightly different format. So it's like we're heavily inspired by some other events that have done this, but like we've got a Give It Up session, as it's kind of titled, which is at the close of the first day, where we invite all of the speakers who are about at that point in time to get up on stage and give like a really short, actionable tip. And that could be like a recommendation for a book, a new tool they've just discovered, or an insight that they've just recently obtained. So I quite like that because that's like very practical.
Yeah.
And so you get this real kind of like punchy list of things that you can do or respond to straight away. And I think that's good because sometimes, even when we're programming the events, it can be often they can be a bit more theoretical. So anything we can do to make it like practical, that's something that immediately goes on someone's to-do list. that will go down really well, I think. So I'm really excited about that session. But we've also got a keynote on the Friday, which is Danny Sullivan from Google. So he's going to be talking a bit about what they're up to at the moment. And I imagine there's going to be some stuff around, SGE, so search generative experiences. And he's also going to be taking questions, some pre-prepared questions from the audience as well. So that'll be really exciting. So we've had sessions a bit like that in the UK with John Mueller, but obviously Danny Sullivan is, very much a kind of, like right at the core of what, Google are up to and how they're talking about it externally. So I'm quite excited to hear how he's framing and presenting the changes that Google are currently going through, and hopefully give us a pretty good insight into what they've got planned for the next 12 to 18 months as well.
And did you just say there that there'll be pre-selected questions from the audience on the day or something like that? I'm just thinking if anyone's listening that wants to ask anything.
Yeah, we've got a form up actually, so I can drop in the show notes if people can quickly kind of respond to that. But yeah, there's kind of an opportunity there to kind of ask these questions. So we'll do a bit of pre-sift beforehand to ensure there's not too many so my cat's websites, trying to keep them varied and interested in and on topic there. But yeah, it'll give us that opportunity for people to ask those questions that they think would be interesting to get answers on.
And you are one for shooting t-shirts into the crowd and other weird and wonderful geeky surprises and gadgets. Is there anything that you can reveal about what you're taking out?
I'm really disappointed, right? Because I thought it's a long-running joke thing we have at Brighton SEO is that I will shoot t-shirts out of a t-shirt cannon. And with varying degrees of success, and often it goes quite badly wrong, as in terms of doesn't shoot very far, not like in terms of major injuries. So I was quite excited about going to the States because I thought I'm going to be able to really go for this. But unfortunately, the nature of our venue is because it's a hotel venue. And they've still got quite high ceilings, but when the subject was broached in terms of, can I do the t-shirt cannon? They kind of looked at me in horror in terms of, well, why would you do that in this low ceiling? So we've got a plan B there that should work on there that I think will go down quite well. And we're currently trying to work out if our mascot suit, we've ordered a fresh mascot suit. So we've got the seagull, and that's currently somewhere on a boat on its way to America. So we're not sure if that's definitely going to be there or if I'm going to have to take it take the UK one as hand luggage on the plane, on that side of things, where I'll have to wear the outfit in order to get it on the plane. So yeah, that should be around as well. And yeah, we've got, a VW camper van, which we used to do in the UK. We're bringing one here into the venue as well. So it's kind of interesting because it's a first event, and there's lots of things that we do in the UK that only really work because, of how established the event is and the space that we were able to kind of expand into, that we haven't been able to do all of those things that, we'd like to in order to do that. But it's about trying to get enough there that we can sort of establish this cultural feel of what the event is about, that hopefully will set us in good stead for the coming years when we'll be able to do even more of the things that we do in the UK. And actually things like, I think we'll be able to do things that we've always wanted to do in the UK, but not been able to do in terms of scope and scale out there, that if we get it right, I'm very excited about what's going to be possible.
Am I right in saying that the only way to experience Brighton SEO US is there in person? Because for the UK, people have got familiar with the live stream on the day and also the video content afterwards.
Yeah, so in the UK now, so we tried a few different things over the years. So we've had live streams, and then we've had a live event where we've recorded them in person and then broadcasted them afterwards. We now just do a video bundle in the UK where you can just download the videos, which has worked really well, actually, I think. And, I'm surprised how successful that's been. Yeah, but for the US this time around, for practical reasons and kind of minimum viable product sort of reasons, we've gone, no, we want it all to be just the kind of, the in-person event there. And maybe down the line we'll look into the opportunities of video producing it, because it's great content afterwards, and it does work well for people who can't travel for whatever reason. But this first time around, we wanted it to be kind of let's keep it simple. So it's 3 tracks, 2 of them of talks, so 2 tracks of talks, and 1 of panel discussions, which we're quite excited about as well.
And so as we're recording this, it's the 17th of October. This episode will be released on the 19th. What's the status of tickets as we record this?
Yeah, so there's still some available there. In fact, I was hoping to do a competition if people are interested in attending on that sort of thing. So the tickets are inevitably in these kind of price on EasyJet style, airline style, where it's the nearer it gets, the more expensive it does in order to encourage people to go a bit sooner. So it's, it's doing well on that front, but there's still, we still make room, and we've got, meticulous planning and scoping and scaling to make sure that we make everybody fit in. But it's coming around soon, and hopefully we'll get a good turnout.
So you mentioned competition there. If people want to try and win tickets, what do they have to do?
Yeah, so I'm keeping it relatively simple, really. So it's over, like I say, it's over 2 days. So we've got the 9th of November and the 10th of November. So I'm going to give away, like 5 tickets to each day. So 5 for the first day, 5 for the Friday. And yeah, keep it dead simple. I will keep my emails open for a week after the podcast is, published. And yeah, if you drop me an email at Kelvin, so that's KELVIN at brightonSEO.com, with the day you want to attend. In the subject line, put like podcast competition, and I will compile them all and then divvy out 5 for the first day and 5 for the Friday.
That is amazing. Links to everything will be in the show notes. The website, if people want to look at more, is us.brightonseo.com. Is that correct? Great. Anything else that you want to share where people can find you or find out more information?
Well, I'm on the various websites at the moment. I'm still kind of heavily addicted to Twitter, so I'm on there, Kelvin Newman at Twitter, and doing more and more on LinkedIn. So if anyone has listened to the show and wants to get in contact, it's Kelvin Newman on LinkedIn as well. Drop me a line there and I'll happily connect.
Or you can spot Kelvin in a seagull costume flying.
Yeah. Having a book extra leg room to get in my mascot out.
If you see a seagull on a plane, hassle him for a ticket. Kelvin, thanks so much for your time. It's great to have you back on and take the conversation full circle with you. And this has been the Internet Marketing Podcast. Take care.